Well, I have noon. How about the rest of you? And I'm excited to be here again this Tuesday. My name is Pastor Dee Sandall. I'm a Lutheran clergy, and I'm a volunteer with the Conference of Addiction and Faith. And as a alcoholic, I have great interest in learning more about this mastering our addiction, which I don't think we ever will. So let us begin today with a word of prayer. Lord, we just ask you to help us see what a bright and glorious day it is, and that you are walking through this day with us, that we are here to have our minds open to new thoughts and directions. And we just pray that you just fill us with your insight and love. We lift it up in your name. Amen. Well, today we're going to hear from Barry Lehman, and he has done a book called Mastering. What's the rest of the word? I haven't got it. Recovery. I knew it. I've got the book here. So
that's a tough word.
yeah, recovery. I'm been sober since January 1st, 1974. So I've had a 50-year. So I'm still working on recovery here, So, but with Barry's was the second week here now working on this. His background is that he has also had a long-term recovery and addiction. He's a counselor. He's a pastor. He has this background of just wanting to help people and recovery. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. One of the reasons that I wrote this particular book, and we talk about mastery and mastering recovery, is that there are, countless books out there on getting sober. Of course, the most famous and the one that many of us started with is Alcoholics Anonymous, the book that is the big book of AA. But when you start looking at how do I maintain sobriety, how do I grow it, there aren't a lot of books out there. And that's why I first wrote Mastering Recovery. I'm going to go into that in more detail, what mastery means here today as we go through this. Let me start by sharing this one. Start. Okay, there we go. So this is where we are today. Week 2. What is that? First, let's take a look back. I'm going to do a quick 2-minute summary of what we did last week. And we talked about it being a disease and recovery from the disease. Maintaining recovery is where we're going to go from now on. What is recovery? It starts in the first 2 years of abstinence. It's a process of change. We improve health and wellness. We learn to live a life that is self-directed. And that means that we have the ability to make good decisions, which we don't often have when we're still using. And then we strive to reach our full potential. That's from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration of the government. The 4 major dimensions of a life in recovery: health, home, purpose, and community. All of those help us build a life in recovery and continue to support it after we maintain sobriety. What are the guiding principles? This comes from NAADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals. Hope. It's person-driven. It's about people. It has many pathways. It's holistic. That means it takes in everything of who we are. It's supported through relationships and social networks. It's culturally based. It's strengthened by addressing the trauma that many of us may have experienced while using or well before. And it's built on family and community resources. The overall process of getting into long-term recovery and moving through it, you begin with abstinence. That leads to a mindset that we call sobriety. As we stay sober, sobriety leads to a sense of freedom and hope. The promise is we will have a new freedom is very real, very real. Recovery is when thinking begins to thinking recovery thinking begins to happen. We hopefully do some thinking before that as we build freedom and hope. That develops a greater self-awareness and we recover our values. What is it that we believe in and trust in? As our experiences of recovery grow more common, we develop freedom, a purpose, and direction, and then it becomes a lifestyle. So that's the background. What about mastery and long-term recovery? Ooh, what motivated you in early recovery? Was it that survival mechanism? That is the original motivation for human beings, daily survival. Sometimes it's a lion chasing us. Sometimes it's something else going on in our lives. And then it becomes the carrot and the stick. That's called extrinsic. It's when we are threatened with something, not necessarily survival, but if you do this, you'll get this. Or if you do this, you'll get this. Either way of saying that same phrase is a type of motivation. It can move us to change. So when you got into recovery, what first motivated you? One of the things that I discovered as I went through this idea of mastery and motivation was that I really got it. I really got
You.
what? Somebody talking?
Oh.
Okay. Okay. I was motivated by survival. When I realized I had this potentially terminal disease called addiction, substance use disorder, I can. Somebody is not muted. Okay. Okay. I was motivated by survival. I wanted to live. That's not a carrot and stick, that's survival. And then I began to discover that if I did certain things, my life felt better. All right, that's extrinsic. That's the carrot and the stick. And if I stop recovery, ooh, I'm in trouble. Not necessarily survival at first, but it sure was part of it. So what motivated you in early recovery? Think about that. What was your motivation? The next question, what motivates you today? And that's where we get to the third level of motivation. And Dan Pink, in his book Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, talks about intrinsic. And that's where whatever it is good just because it is. Recovery doesn't give us anything when it's intrinsic, except it's just good. And we know it's good and we keep doing it because it's good. I know that sounds repetitive, but that's what it's all about. And we get that kind of intrinsic inner motivation through all of these different. We become a learner. We learn about ourselves, autonomy. We have the ability to reflect. Well, let's talk about mastery. Dee made the comment that we never master it. Amen. Mastery, as it's talked about in this process, is not something, it is absolutely not something that you can ever reach. That's called perfection, and we never do that. Mastery, as the people who, as Dan Pink and others talk about it, mastery is getting better at something important to you. It's building. How did I learn this? Well, where I first began to realize this was how I stayed sober for many years was when I went to a trumpet camp. I'm a trumpet player. I played trumpet since 8th grade. And I never stopped. I'm not a comeback player. I continued to play in various small ways for many years. About 8, 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to learn how to jazz. I I'd had a bad experience myself, and I kind of I'd been stuck for years. I never thought I'd get any better. That was what I thought was acceptance. It's not, but it was where I was stuck. I went to this camp in short, and I learned there that I don't have to be stuck. That's an important thing to remember. I don't have to be stuck where I am. Something can change. So that's where there we got the carrot and the stick. Things I wanted to get better. So okay, now what am I going to do? Well, the director who led that particular workshop for jazz also did a trumpet workshop. This was over at Shell Lake in Wisconsin. He's jazz and trumpet director at University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. So I went to that and I learned how to practice. Now, after at that point 50 years of playing trumpet, I finally learned how to practice. Sounds silly, but most of us don't learn how to do that. I learned how to get better at playing trumpet. That's what mastery became. I decided I wanted to become better at being a musician. The whole idea of mastery then is in uh, 3 parts, and you'll find this in Dan Pink's book. The first one, actually, it's 3 parts of motivation, but we're not going to argue words here. Foundation, flow, and freedom is what I call the 3. Autonomy, mastery, and finding purpose. That's the process of mastery. It applies to absolutely everything. Anytime we want to get better at something, this is a process that we can follow. The autonomy, mastery, and purpose are more of Pink's words and others who have written about it. Another way of looking at it is building, practicing, and growing. So, how does this all work? It starts with basics. And I want you to stop and think for a minute. When I say basics in recovery, what do you think of? What are the basics? What is it that I hate to use the word gotta do first, because we all have different things and we start at different places. But what is it that has to be there?
Honesty. You have to get honest that you have a problem.
Good one. What else?
Don't drink and go to meetings.
Actually, I'm not so sure that's true. If you're going to survive, you have to stop drinking. Yes. But there was one guy I can still remember. He came to meetings drunk, many times, until one month he ended up in the ER, and the next week he showed up sober, and he stayed sober because he felt comfortable in the rooms. So maybe go to meetings, but don't go drunk if you can avoid it. But yeah, stop drinking. What else? What are the basics?
I was going to say community.
Community, right? So we have community, we have abstinence, we have honesty. Let's go back here a minute. There we have some of those principles that I've talked about before. It has to be hope. That's another one. That's in that honesty. Honesty and hope. I think the first thing is we got to believe that we can do this. We got to believe somehow or another that it's possible. Now, that may be through working steps. It may be, and it is. Oftentimes, I face my problem back to steps 1, 2, and 3. I have a problem, the honesty. There has to be something that'll get me past this into recovery. That's hope. And then the community, I think, is one of the places where we turn to say, and now I'm going to ask for help from these people, whoever that may be, the treatment centers, the meetings we go to. That's building, that's the foundation. One of the things I learned as a trumpet player, and I've had the good fortune of meeting both Doc Severinsen, who was a longtime director of the Tonight Show band, and Herb Alpert of Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. What they do on a regular basis is practice the basics. Every day that I was told that Doc starts his warm-up, he plays scales and long tones. After playing music for 80 years, he's in his 90s now. After playing music for 80 years, he still starts with da 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 da, and he does that for an hour. I learned you start and you never lose sight of the basics. So that's what's called autonomy. That ability to make decisions that are healthy. The foundation of recovery, of mastery, the foundation of mastery is to develop a growth mindset that says, yes, I can do this. Not alone, but I can do this. My problem for years as a trumpet player was that I didn't believe I could do it. I believed I got as far as I could go and I couldn't go any further. I'm a mediocre trumpet player. That's it. Never find any way. And as I get older, it's only going to be harder, and all the winding and everything. I didn't have a growth mindset. I had to become a believer, so to speak, that we can grow, we can change. And part of how we do that is we become aware of who we are. And this is all part of that. We build all of this in the first 2 years, but then here I am, 10 years sober, and all of a sudden I hit a wall. All of a sudden something happens and I go, oh, well, I guess I'm never going to escape it. I'm always going to have these awful cravings. I'm always going to do this. I'm always going to fall back into woe is me. And when I do that, I've forgotten the basics that I can change, the basics that I can build and have an ability. And in the midst of that, when I do that, I can begin to discover what it is I truly want, the foundation. We'll talk about this as a cycle later, but all this does is we then begin to increase our skills, our confidence is built, and we become empowered. For those of us who are used to the 12-step language, we're powerless. Yeah, but the but is we are not powerless when we reach out to those who can help us. Starting with some of us with a treatment program, some of us it was a sponsor, some of us it was the ability to turn it over to a higher power that we choose to call God. Take your pick. But we discovered that we could do this. And in the midst of that, we discovered what it was that we really want. Important as we stay sober, we need to be looking at that on a regular basis. And that's where mastery becomes part of our cycle of life. Mastering our lives, getting better at being sober, getting better at being in recovery. I hope I'm better at it today than I was I know I'm better today than I was 5 years ago, because a few things happened during the years of the pandemic that reminded me I needed some strength building. I needed some empowerment. I needed new skills that I hadn't had before, or I had never felt I needed before. That's the power of mastery. What was your foundation? We all had a different one. It goes back to that motivation, building a growth mindset. Now, where are you today? What skills? What confidence do you need? Where do you still feel powerless and maybe even on the edge of hopeless at times? Where do you feel stuck? Now, if this sounds like a bunch of questions to ask yourself to take an inventory, you're right. That's exactly what they are. They are part of a regular inventory of our recovery. Most of the time, we don't have to go through this. Most of the time, we don't have to ask those basic questions. But sometimes when life jumps in front of us like that, we will have to ask those questions. We will have to work on them, which is where this whole thing of mastery becomes a habit. Thoughts or comments?
Sure, Karen.
Yep.
No, yeah, I definitely believe that. Like my foundation, I even have a tattoo. I only have one tattoo. It's on my arm. I never thought I would get one at like 60, but it says honest, open, and willing. Because it's a good reminder that that is my foundation to always, I know in AA it's like open and willing to a higher power and giving over my ego. That's part of it, but also to be open and willing for whatever challenges, open to suggestions, open to new ideas, willing to do work, willing to listen to others. So it's all encompassing. But as for like a daily inventory, I do like that about the 12 steps, whether people follow that as their route. There are pieces that are like really good ideas. That, a nightly inventory, I always equate like, and I know I'm not original, but like the fourth step is cleaning your house thoroughly. And then daily maintenance is really just like if you spill milk on the counter, you cleaned your whole house, but like let's clean up that little spill on the counter. That's the daily inventory to keep me strong. So
I
that's
like that. I like that illustration. That's a good one.
thanks.
Yeah, great. If you spill milk, you clean that up. That's the daily issues. That isn't, oh, my life is falling apart. Someday it may start that way if the middle of the pandemic, you realize you're not moving anywhere, you're stuck. So then you begin to dig down to that. What milk do I clean up today? Yeah. Good illustration. I like that. What else? Anybody else have any thoughts on this foundation part?
Well, for me, what Karen said about especially step 10, the daily inventory, I've found I use that especially to go back to steps 6 and 7, the character defects, the inventory. What milk am I spilling today? What glass do I keep knocking over and spilling on people? And what do I have to keep cleaning up? And if I see a pattern, perhaps that's one of my character defects that I need to work on. And that's
I like
really
that
been,
too. Yeah.
it's just been a useful reflection and action for myself. It's back to that honesty. I have to want to, even though I'm not going to immediately at night perhaps go and talk to the person I need to give an amends to or do something about, at least I can admit it to myself and say, I need to do something with that. So then when I wake up, okay, that's the review. Today, what can I be doing? So that's been a good feedback loop for me to keep aware and working, again, the mastering, working on my character defects.
One of the things I learned with that particular, in the middle of the night, I think of somebody I owe an amend to. Sometimes I'll come and I'll make a note and then just work in my head. Okay, what am I going to say? Oh, I'm going to write them an email tomorrow, and this is what I'm going to say. and then I can go to sleep. It's really that simple. And, you know, of course, I never want to believe it's that simple. I want to make it a lot more difficult. But that's a good, yeah, that's a good example of that as well. And that's empowering. That idea of being empowered, that empowering is found in the big book, in second step already. When you read that, you know, it's there. That idea that there's someplace I can get help is very empowering and hope inducing. But the second part, or the second phase of mastery, of motivation, I gotta be honest here, is what in the book, in Pink's book and others, is called, that's the mastery. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are the three. Mastery is practicing. It's getting better. It comes from self-awareness, mindfulness, and it's being teachable, being honest, open, and willing. So if I were to do three things in the flow, and I'll talk about flow in a second, this would be make a plan, work the plan, stay unstuck. That's, if you want, that's the goal. The goal of this phase of mastery is continuing to move, to not get stuck. And we all get stuck at something. And it's not, you know, that's not a stigma, it's not a judgment. Our brains are in there, and sometimes they've been hijacked by all kinds of stuff. It may be something that happened years ago that we forget even happened, and all of a sudden we realize. And that's one of the things about trauma and why it's important to deal with, is that it can show up again. But being teachable. Flow is an idea that was been around for quite a few years. Having said that, I was taking my doctoral program when that book came out, not a long time ago now. But Michaela Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book on it called Flow back in the 80s, early 90s. And flow is that ability to just, well, let's go with the flow. It's that sense that everything is falling into place. And that comes because we make and work a plan. We begin to get in the habit. And playing a trumpet, for example, there are times, and it doesn't happen very often in a performance because I have to be a little more focused than this. But when I'm working here in my office, and my trumpet sits right here next to me, I can be doing, I just like to play. I'll play 5 minutes worth of playing on a scale. And in the middle of that, I realize my fingers are just moving. I realize that I don't know what key I'm in or whatever, but I'm realizing that I'm playing through that, and it's just happening, and it feels good. That's back to the intrinsic motivation. It feels good to pick up that trumpet and play. Some days the trumpet wants to fight back, but most days it feels okay to play, and some days it's just great. And that greatness comes because at times I'm in a performance, and we're at a nursing home, and I'm the announcer, and I'm saying, and now we're going to play one of those songs that you all know and you all are familiar with. It's the song that won World War II. And we play In the Mood. The room changes immediately. People who weren't doing anything, who were kind of sitting there like this, listening to us, kind of sit up and smile. That motivates me, because I'm able, as part of this group, to do that. That's flow. It's habit, and it takes practice. Pablo Casals, the musician, and this is why we talk about mastery is not something you can achieve. In his 90s, he was asked, why does he still practice? And his answer was, I think I'm getting better. How true. I'm better at recovery today than I used to be. probably even than I was last week, because I've had to work through this again, just putting this together. Like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not doing that as much as I should, or I need to. Thoughts about flow? Any examples of that for you?
Sure.
Sure, go.
Yeah, Karen again. Yeah, I feel like flow for me is when I get out of my own way. I guess
Mm,
I take on to the spiritual aspect. I know things
yeah,
are like when I'm stuck, I just feel like I'm too in the ego, too in me, too in trying to control what can I do. And I'm kind of fighting like the natural flow of life, the higher above. He has his plans for me, and I was thinking of the way that the music flows through you, because we're all given gifts from God, um, and your gift apparently is in music and playing a trumpet. And when you go and you use the gift from God, and you just, and like you said, like, you don't even think, that is almost like spiritual, not to get too spiritual, Reverend, but yeah, no. So I always just say, I always feel like I'm blocking my own flow in the river of life. I'm the obstacle. So every time I get out of the way and let it go nicely, things go well. Does that make sense?
yep. And one of the things about flow in general and habit in general is that flow is a balance, and we can talk about balance and lots of things. When flow happens, it's neither too difficult nor too easy.
Mm,
It's at that spot where it just feels right to be able to do this.
mm.
Now, I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Da, 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 da. That's not, I'll never get into flow playing Mary Had a Little Lamb like that. It's just too simple.
Mm,
My mind
mm,
can wander into 101 different things while doing that. Now, if I tried to play that in all 12 keys, it may get a little more difficult. So I'll be thinking too much. What if I tried to play it, just let it flow? Use that word. Use it to play and just fool around with it, add notes here. And
mm,
perhaps in the middle of that, playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, I might find some interesting stuff.
mm-hmm.
Doc Severinsen has an album of children's songs, lullabies. Beautiful, just
Mm.
beautiful. And I'm sure, knowing Doc, that he was in the flow when he was playing those, because it just moves, it flows, it's beautiful. Yep,
Yeah. No, I get it. And I'm thinking faith without action is dead, because like faith
yep.
and trust that I have these talents, because I can relate. I'm a designer, graphic design. And
Mm.
you're right. I would get bored. I used to do repeat prints for Joe Boxer and stuff. Things that go on men's boxer shorts or kids' pajamas. If I had to do the same little teddy bear repeat pattern over and over, I wanted to like shoot myself. I could do it, but but it's when I really get lost, and in the flow is when I'm doing something that I'm learning, but I know I'm capable, and it's just all creative, and it comes to like a beautiful symphony. Yeah. So yeah,
Yep.
that's when I get lost. Yeah.
Anything else? Here's, you've set me up for my next section here. So let me show you the next section.
Oh,
Creativity and purpose is what we can talk about in the third phase, and that's the freedom phase. When you've had an experience of flow, you want to continue it. You want to be able to build on it. And that gives you a freedom. That's the confidence, all those things you've been building. It gives, and you mentioned I have a gift to hopefully have a gift of playing trumpet and so on. That's a purpose. There's a meaning and purpose to that for in my life. I'm not a quote unquote professional. And that only means maybe I am. I never get paid for it. So anyway, I must be professional. But but professional doesn't necessarily mean just getting paid. I probably am at a good advanced level, probably professional level of playing after all these years. But it's in the purpose of joining a band making music, being part of the group. I do recording. I'm the announcer of the big band. I do recordings of our concert band and put them online. Purpose that I wouldn't have. When I first started playing in the big band, I did not have the skill. And I still play fourth in the big band, but I didn't have the jazz skill. The only thing that kept me going was I had the purpose of being the announcer. And in that, I kept learning. I worked on mastery. I kept growing. Now you notice the three things underneath: spirituality and community. Now they go together. I can't separate spirituality and community. It's called connections. As I said last week, and I've said 100 times probably over lots of places, the opposite of addiction is not recovery. The opposite of addiction is connection. Johann Hari, Gabor Mate have all said that as well. That's where I got it anyway. Spirituality, connection with others, connection with life and the world. Life has meaning and direction. Values. By the time we reach this level in early recovery, we're doing pretty good. This is in the middle of the first year, well into the second year of recovery. Our values are becoming clear. We're able to talk about them. And then we build them in long-term recovery. That's our foundation again. And we discover new ways of describing them. How do my values fit? Where am I not following my values? What value do I need to work on? What purpose do I have? And the bottom line, and I think it's for want of a better word, it's the end result of all of this: gratitude and acceptance. And I'll get into those more next week and in the last week. But there's this process that we've gone through from foundation or autonomy, knowing we can do it, into flow. That's the practice. That's getting in the habit. That's mastery. And then finally, the freedom to grow and to have a purpose and meaning in our lives. That is the road of recovery. Some people would disagree on some parts of it. Certain words have stigma attached to them, such as spirituality. You know, we are afraid of religion, or we're afraid of spirituality. We're afraid of something that may be transcendent. Okay, doesn't mean you have to. Spirituality is connection. That's what it is. Connection to that which is greater than ourselves. Connection with other people. Connection with ourselves, where we find our values. That's, by the time we get into long-term recovery, we know the answer to some of the answers to this. Now that's going to change. I was reading a book last night. It was on spirituality, and he talked about, he was talking about walking in wilderness. And his line was, he goes up to the Boundary Waters here in Minnesota, and every time he goes on that same trail or across that same portage or lake, it's different. It's not the same trail. It's not the same portage. It's not the same lake. Depending on time of the year, is it wet or dry? Are there flowers there, or are they gone for the season? Are there loons out today? Is there an eagle up there? The awareness becomes that every time I'm going through this, it's going to be different. And I may learn something new. That goes back to the foundation, which takes me to that long-term recovery journey. The foundation, the practice, and the freedom. Discover your skills, sure. Discover your skills and goals. Practice and grow your skills based on your goals. You therefore live with purpose and gratitude, and then you celebrate and go deeper. Don't forget to celebrate. Don't forget to go deeper. When you get, Some people, when they work on specific things, talk about mastery like this and say, okay, you take 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, and you work on this skill. I need a better understanding of meditation, for example. So you make yourself, or you find a plan that says, I'm going to practice and grow that skill because I'm finding myself not having enough awareness of what's going on around me. So you do that for 3, 6, 12 weeks, whatever. You work through the foundation, you spend time practicing, you find purpose in it. That's the process of mastery. And at the end of that, you go, wow, take that inventory again. You take inventory all along, and we'll talk more about this next week. You take inventory all along. That's how you continue to discover, how you practice. You don't go to the person and say, how am I doing? Expecting them to just go, hey, you're doing great. Keep at it. That person is not helping you. Until they say, have you tried this as a way of expanding it? You know, as I hear you talk, you're talking about this. Are you really sure that's what you want? That's where inventory, that's where a sponsor comes in, by the way. That's the role of a sponsor in early recovery and on. The person who says, hey, wait a minute. I'm seeing you're kind of acting slippery there, is one way you might say. And that can happen. There's a point, for example, at about 4 years, 3 to 5 years, where where graphs show things cross. That's a slippery spot. It happens for many. Think back to your 4.5 years sober. Chances are, and I've talked to quite a few people with this, where they've experienced at that point uncertainty, maybe a slip, but often just that uncertainty and discomfort. That's where this whole process comes in. You go back and you work on it. There's another point between 9 and 11, 12 years, somewhere in there as well. And after that, it's more dependent on situations around you. But those first two tend to be fairly common. So it's something we need to work. And I know people who had it happen in the pandemic. I did. I didn't slip, but I wasn't even thinking of using. But I certainly wasn't happy, joyous, and free. Let me stop the sharing and just open it up for discussions. Community, I'm looking over here now, hoping to doing things different. Yeah, lots of stuff going on there. And I think that's really the center of mastery, is keeping moving on, getting better at something important to you. What questions do you have? Oh, I didn't do that good of a job.
Well, as somebody that's been around the block a couple of days, I do remember that 5-year mark and how it was so scary. Like you thought you were just not going anywhere. And I always found that writing for me always triggered it. And I'm not a writer, and I will never say that that's my go-to, but only when I felt scared that I might drink again did I ever go to writing. And then I wrote ferociously. And I don't know why, it's just that's what I needed to do to find myself again. So I thought that was something that may have helped.
Yeah, to find those particular activities that do that for you. This book I was reading last night is about some of that, and this person's going out into the wilderness did that for him. Same kind of process. Yours is writing, mine was writing. Mine is also playing my trumpet. There are times when I just pick that thing up and play for half an hour, or just playing scales and trying to play some songs, and just because it helps me focus. It helps me work on what's happening inside me.
Yeah, I guess of course I'll share. No,
Okay.
no, I have 4 years, and so I'll be coming up on that mark, and it's like, oh crap. But I'm like, oh, of all the numbers to pick. But honestly, I had, when I was in rehab, they said that alcoholism is a disease of emotions. So, like, I realized how afraid I was of emotions. So, I remember a couple of years ago, I went into a deep depression. I've had chronic depression and PTSD since I was like 17. So, but for 2 years, I didn't have any, like, I was feeling pretty okay. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh no, here I am sober and I'm going into a deep depression. And I was like, I called my priest. I called, I had my, everybody in I called, I pulled out all stops, and it wasn't leaving me until finally it did. And I realized in retrospect that because I was so afraid of it, I think I kept it, like, it made me stuck. So my note to self, and what I learned from it, is when I do get like overwhelmed or an anxious moment, like realizing this too shall pass and don't build on it. So
Right.
that helps me. And then going back to the honest, open and willing, just always open to learning and moving forward, and lots of growth and lots of it's maintenance every day, and it's always going to be. And that realization came to me like a year or so ago. And I looked at my husband and I go, holy crap, this like will never go away. It is what it is. So, but it is what it is. I learned, so it's okay.
And you're sitting here, you're in that 4 to 6 year, 4 to 5 year time span here. Okay, so what? So what?
Great.
And I say that with a smile on my face, because I know the so what. It's important. Of course it is. But you're aware. Number one, you're aware. You've been through situations and you've handled them. You've found out ways to handle them. Your mastery of recovery is continuing to grow because you face those. So what's going to happen next? Who knows? Who knows where it's going to kind of come from? Chances are you won't even recognize it at first when it happens. At first, but you have enough experience, you have enough awareness. You're sitting here, you're talking about it. You obviously know it's real. So when it happens, you won't be surprised by it.
Mm.
And you'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. I had a note here from Katie that about, and it applies to this, any tricks to chasing away the negative thoughts, like almost brainwashing oneself. I'm not sure I'd call it brainwashing, although maybe that's a good word. Cleaning out the brain. Like I just said a moment ago, Karen, to you, what worked? Always start with what's been working. Even at those times when things aren't looking good, when you're in a depression, when you're whatever, what have I been doing that's worked? Always look at your skills first. I'm a skills-based counselor when it comes to these kind of things. What's worked? Well, try it. It's that simple sometimes. And the next step of that is what's different now that needs a different understanding of my skills. Why are things different? Well, I'm 5 years sober instead of 3. Okay, that means I have more awareness. That means, it may mean to some people, and we've all heard this at meetings, the person at 35 years is closer to their next drink than the person who has 1 month. I don't know whether you've heard that, but that's an old line that used to be around AA. I'm not sure I agree with it quite as strongly as they meant it, but I remember hearing that 35 years ago. The guy never did drink again. It was a way of reminding himself, you know, if I may use sooner than not if I don't take care of myself. So you look at what skills you need to build. What's working? How can I use that skill to build a skill that I don't have? Or that I've lost the sight of? Maybe I used to take a more regular inventory, but I've developed this self-awareness skill here. Maybe I need to take that and use my self-awareness, meditation, mindfulness skill to look at specifics in my life. Apply it in specifics. Look back at your foundation of your recovery. What, my good old question that I'd ask just about every sponsor I ever had, what step are you working on today? Or what step do you need to work on today? And when I ask myself that question, most of the time it goes back to the first step, but that's neither here nor there. So there was a time when, a couple of times I can think of when I needed to be working on the 8th and 9th step, or I really needed to do that 7th step and turn this over. But just by asking the question, going back to your foundation, playing your basic scale, da 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Find it interesting. There are 12 notes in this on the piano in the scale. 12 notes from C to B. C, C sharp, D, so on. Maybe I ought to play with that for myself sometime. So, yeah, so that's how you do it. Yeah, the 12 steps, 12 steps. Chase away. You're not trying to chase away the negative thoughts. You're trying to deal with them. You notice them. Well, where are they coming from? Don't be afraid of the negative thought. That's one I've had difficulty learning personally. Because I'm having this, oh my goodness, my program is falling apart. I'm going to use next week. It's all that catastrophizing. And it doesn't get me anywhere except closer to drinking. So what you say is, oh, I've had that experience. Aha, I'm feeling that. Why? Where's that coming from? Okay, it's there. Turn it over and see what happens. Katie put in the chat, I forget which link this is. Oh, that's one of them. Okay. I should take that one down and change it. Sorry about that. Here's another one. This is the more recent one. Yeah, that one shows a little differently than, yeah. I have a weekly newsletter. It goes out every Wednesday. It's free. Spam is not, as I say, spam is not part of recovery. Unless you're eating our Minnesota delicacy. But spam on a computer is not part of recovery. You can disassociate anytime you wish. And let me show you one other. Okay, where did I put it? Are you seeing? No, that's not what I want. What else? All right. Stop sharing, Barry. Over on the Center for Addiction and Faith webpage is Okay, where is it? I thought I put it up there. Anyway, there's something there where you go to the page, CAF page, and the resources page, and you will find a book club. And so last week's is up. I assume this one will be up within a few days. There's also the workshop I did a few weeks ago. So it's you can go and look at this again if you want.
Sounds great. Thank you, Barry. It's been a great week. So we've had master recovery. We've had the first week, you introduced addiction and all its meanings and backgrounds. And today you taught us how to walk through all those nuances. And next week, you're going to teach us about living in recovery, huh? That sounds,
You got it.
yeah. So that sounds exciting. We want to live and live powerfully and gloriously, because that's what God wants us to do. And tomorrow we have Roseanne Fort. I don't know if you can see this. I got too much glare or something. Roseanne Fort. She did a freedom from alcohol, and she's got a different approach. And she's at noon tomorrow on the Conference of Addiction and Faith here. You can get that link in. And also our conference is this fall, October 17th through 19th, and it's going to be all online. And so we'll be able to listen to it and not at various times. If you want to get on our mailing list, you can also just go to the webpage. And also we'd appreciate any income that you might like to give us on the conference to pay for all of this work that we have been doing. And so all donations are gratefully welcomed, and you can go to the page and get that link. And Katie is posting all of this stuff on the chat. And before you get out, you need to click on it, otherwise it'll disappear. So make sure you do that before you leave. Any other questions or anything before we go today?
No, I was going to type it, but thank you. And thanks to the center, really wonderful programming. And Barry, thank you. Wonderful book. I was thinking it'd be really fun for you to blog or something. I love the fact that there's 12 notes on a scale and the 12 steps. I feel like there's a story there somewhere, like a fun little.
Yeah.
I like that, and I love jazz, so I love them going up and down the scale. You know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
You're
the milk thing's
you,
really good.
I like that. I have to write that spilled milk, because you'll be surprised if you do sign up for my newsletter that you will get some of these ideas showing up. They will be there.
You read about yourself. All right. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next Tuesday at noon.
That's good.
Take care. God bless.
Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.